can't stand it anymore. It's enough. I can't do this anymore. There's Colonel Chabad. There's all these poor people. People phone me up night and day. Everybody seems to think that I can help them. Everybody wants help in the world of medicine. I said, it's too much. It's driving me crazy. I just cannot cope with this, Leave me out. The rubbish what I said to myself. And I walked into the shul, and there was a guy doing the Daf Yom Yeshia. And as I walk in, he says, and if a person should ever say to himself, it's too much, I can't cope with all these things, I should know that Kodesh Baruch Hu never gives anybody to cope with more than what he can cope with. So you should just be happy with what you've got to do. I said, well, thank you for the fast answer,
Was that a collect call?
Yeah.
Do I have to pay for it too?
I promise you, it's exactly like that. I couldn't believe it.
Nan b'Masechet Negeim. That's not what we want. Garsinan Bagmore. Okay, so this is Likutei Sichot, volume 37, page 33.
Yeah.
Okay.
Garsinan
Bagmora. Mashmo shel Mashiach. What is the name of Mashiach? Rabbanan Amrei Chivra Devei Rebbe Shmo. So this is on Sanhedrin, the famous sugya in Tzadik Chet Amun Bet.
Where he's sitting outside Rome tying his bandages?
No, that's from Baba Metzia.
Okay.
No, that's the story with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Here's those daf 98 on both sides. It's all talking about the future. Right?
Okay. I did let me say this in
Okay. So there it says also that there are 4 names to Mashiach, right?
Okay.
Menachem, Shiloh, Yinon, and
so that's why the Rebbe always learned the Sefta Sanhedrin when it came to giving out the Shach and Rutas Kislev. Mainly because of that.
So it says Devei Rabbi Shila by Rabbi Shila's academy. They said his name is Shiloh, like Shila, same thing. But in Devei Rabbi Nechemia they called him Hanania. In each one saw his Rebbe as the Mashiach. Okay. And then Rabbanan say in general he's called Chivra Devei Rebbe, meaning Metzora shel Beit Rebbe, says Rashi. Meaning he's a leper. Shneimar Achen Cholyenu, Yeshaya says in chapter 53, Achen Cholyenu Nasa Machovenu Savlam, Ve'anachnu Chashavnu Nagua Muke Elokim Umeune. Indeed, he's carried our sicknesses and he suffers our pain, and we thought that he is afflicted, and he's Muke Elokim is like he's been hurt by God, meaning he's blemished by God, and tortured. He has all kinds of yisurim, all kinds of suffering.
But she's taking over us.
It's not what it said. It says
that was a question.
No, it said Cholyenu Nasa. He's afflicted. It's like a person like a father who sees his children arguing. He becomes sick from it. Doesn't mean that he's carrying their sickness. It means that he's suffering from it.
Mashiach must know why Mashiach's not coming.
So let's see. בצורך בירור. למה מתבטא העניין דחולנו נשא מכוון סילום בעניין שנגוע מצורע דווקא? So if you're afflicted with some kind of suffering because of what you're seeing, and it says that he's afflicted by the fact that the Jewish people argue with one another, they don't love one another. So why does he become a Metzora?
We said yesterday Metzora is only in the time of the Beis Hamikdash.
What?
We said yesterday Metzora is only in the time of the Beis Hamikdash.
So obviously we're not talking about actual Torahs. We're talking about the symbol. Why is the symbol that Yeshaya uses and the sages say means Torahs? Why is that the symbol for affliction? So stam the reason is V'lo b'shem stam shel sevel v'choli. Why do you have to say he's nagua? Why can't you just say he's suffering? He's sevel. He has some kind of burden and sickness. Why does it have to become Torah? So the simple reason is, right, that why does Torah come? So Chazal say in the way of sort of like how should I say it? As an asmachta, like they're trying to give you an idea. So they say Metzora motzi shem ra, because he talks slander. So they don't mean that it's because he talks slander. They mean, in general, that the person doesn't love his fellow Jew the way you should. Anything that you do, Motzi Shem Ra is just a sniff. It's just a part of. It's one of the parts of not loving your fellow as you should. So Taras comes from hatred of other people. That's the general gist. The fact that they said Motzi Shem Ra doesn't mean that it has to be. Again, you also see by Miriam. Said there's an example. There's other people who are also Mitzoraim. Moshe Rabbeinu. So he also said Motzi Shem Ra. He said Vehen lo ya'aminu li. They won't believe me. So you find all kinds of examples of it. What?
He took his arm out of his sleeve.
Yeah, but what do the sages say? They say that really it's when somebody comes to you and asks for a tool, and you say, I don't have it. You don't have it. So now we'll give your house tzaras. We'll give your... Again, it depends on you didn't say anything. You didn't slander the person. You didn't express your avos Yisrael. You didn't care for the other person. So if you don't care for the other people, tzaras is what comes. Okay. So
you're
that's
not allowed to say no to anybody. You're not allowed to say
if you have it, why don't you give it? If you're afraid he's going to break it,
I have a reason why I
it.
don't want to give it to you.
You said, I don't have to, but don't say I don't have it.
Isn't it worse because you're a clumsy idiot and I know you're going to smash it?
So tell him then you're responsible for it. If he still wants to take it.
I have a book, one edition only, never been reprinted. This is by a guy who did a PhD thesis on Refinement, from guy. It's a very interesting book. You came to me and said, can I borrow it? I'd say no, because somebody once borrowed it from me and it took me 2 years to get it back, and I don't want to lose it. You know what I'd say then?
If the person is making his parnasa from the tool, it's not because he wants to pick his nose with it. It's something that he needs for his field. He's not an idiot. It's not some valuable thing that if you bring. No, it's something I'm not using right now, and you need it to make your parnasa. What's the big deal? And if he makes since it's a tool of a trade, it's a tradesman's tool. So there's every reason that even if he breaks it, he's going to bring you another one. There's no...
Okay.
In any case. So, the general gist of Tzaras is that it's a problem with Avas Yisrael. With love of your fellow Jew. And the Motzi Shem Ra is just the most personal, you could say. Yeah. But it's a whole gamut of problems. So he says, why is the Mashiach afflicted with? So the simple answer is he's afflicted with tzaras because he sees the bickering of the Jewish people.
But he didn't do it, so why does he have to be afflicted?
He was afflicted by it. Okay, so let's hear.
So I said he's taking on the.
Hold on. So now this should be interpreted. The reason it's tzaras is based on what we learned in the Alter Rebbe yesterday. That a man, Adam, should be in the flesh of his skin a nega. לזה שנאמר כאן תואר אדם דווקא שהוא שם המעלה של ישראל, ולפי שעניין הנגעים שהם באור בשרו מורה על בחינה התחתונה, שלא נתברר הרע והפסולת ממנו. So, the fact that it's called an Adam, which is the higher description, and אתם קוראים אדם, specifically of the Jewish people, you're called man. But yet it comes at the very end of the body, which is the skin, and the skin that covers the body. So it indicates that it's in the lowest place of the highest person. And this person, he's on a very high spiritual level, like the Mashiach. And what's missing is the very end of his rectification, at the very edges of his being and his skin. That really in Ruchnius, internally, he's already done all the work. That he's already rectified and selected all and removed all the evil and refined himself in all things. It's only the very end of his garments.
The end of the end.
Okay. That has not been refined yet. So therefore, negaim, meaning tzaras, leprosy, is only shayach by a person who is whole, and it was already complete, who was consummately righteous. That the evils have already been removed entirely from the inner aspect of his body and his soul. Okay? And all he's missing is the rectification, the refinement of his external aspects, his garments. And that's why we don't have it today, because even today, even if a person is consummately righteous, he still can't remove everything. Why can't he remove everything? Why? Because without the Beis HaMikdash to give you kapara, without the Beis HaMikdash to remove all the negative, so you can't completely purify yourself. There's something missing.
So you're telling me that it doesn't matter how much tshuva you do, if you don't bring korban to the Beis HaMikdash.
There's always There's always going to be something missing. So that's the reason why the Mashiach is called a chivra, a metzora. Somebody has leprosy. And again, we don't mean the leprosy that's the silly thing that they associated with it, which is some kind of bacterial disease. We mean the spiritual disease. Because it shows that when he fixes this, he will be the consummately perfect person. Right, the description in Yeshaya, the chapter before, which is the 5 levels of Moshe Rabbeinu. And here the Rebbe quotes, very interesting, Shu lemala gami Moshe, that he's higher even than Moshe Rabbeinu. He's even more exalted than Moshe. And therefore he's called afflicted, because all he has to refine now is the very end of his garments, the very end of his thought, speech, and action. Okay, so that's the simple level. So in depth we can say, perhaps, says the Rebbe, the whole purpose of this exile, which is so long, is to refine the Jewish people. In the same way that the enslavement in Egypt for 210 years, if you do some simple math, then if we were in Egypt for 210 years, how many years would we be in exile now? 2100.
Where'd you get that from?
Everything is times 10.
I don't agree with you. I think the girl should finish it right now.
How do you know it's not finished?
Because if there's another Beis HaMikdash, I'm not going to work tomorrow.
Ken, but how do you know it? How do you know? Hold on. So the whole purpose is to refine the Jewish people, and especially in the time that's called the heels of Mashiach, the very end of the exile. At the very end, you refine the small things that are left over. And obviously, you're not starting to clean and cook now. Okay? You're just moments before Shabbos. So you have these small things that you have to do. And the Mashiach represents like the general aspect of the entire Jewish people. And in the same way that he will rectify and refine it in himself, he's going to rectify and refine it in the entire Jewish people, these small things that are left over. Already tells you that the Rebbe's picture of the Jewish people is very different than the way that other people look at it. Other people look and say, I look at this people and all I see is hatred, all I see is not following Torah, all I see is this, all I see is that. And when the Rebbe looks at it, he says, that's not what I see. And I see that it's mostly refined. There are small things that need to be fixed. How can you explain such a discrepancy? That somebody else looks at it and says, this is it's never been worse. And everybody says it's never been worse. It's never like this.
Look how many issues there are. It's just
What?
look how many people sit in the Torah all day long.
Maybe that's the bad part. Maybe that's the part that needs to be refined. At least according to Rebusha, that was the entire problem. Okay? Meaning that you already have people who learn. They dedicate their lives to it. And yet, like we discussed yesterday, why is he doing it? For the wrong reason. So the reason is a simple thing to change. Because he's not going to change his lifestyle now. He's 50 years old. He's been learning his whole life. He's not going to stop learning because you tell him you're learning for the wrong reason. He's not going to do that. He's going to continue. So fixing the reason is a small thing. And it's just fixing the thought a little bit. Maybe it's fixing the action a little bit. For instance, that just the moment before you start learning, you say, oh, this is all Lishma, I don't care what I get from it. Maybe that's all it is. It's such a simple thing. So if in the great, great people who dedicate their lives to learning Torah, it's just that small, tinkering with what they're doing, so probably by everybody it's the same thing. This is little small things. And the moment you change them, everything changes. And that's how the Rebbe saw Am Yisrael. He saw people who are ready for Gula, ready to be redeemed. The small things that need to be changed. וזהו שמשיח נקרא מצורע בבני שחולנו נשא מחובנו סבלם שזהו מצד פעולתו של משיח בבני ישראל. So what is it saying? It's saying it's not that he's carrying our burden for us. No, he feels what needs to be done. Don't turn him into some kind of passive idiot who Nebuch is just suffering from what he sees. No, he has to feel on himself in the same way that any good therapist has to be able to get into your shoes in order to help you. If you can't identify with the person, you can't help them. So he identifies with us. So we, as a people, we have these small things that need to be fixed. And he feels it on his body. He feels it exactly where it is, and therefore it's easy for him to fix it. Because it's not some spiritual thing that either he sees or doesn't see. It's like for him, it's something physical that he can sense right now. It's not that he is afflicted because of himself. He didn't do anything wrong. He's perfect. But he has to be able to identify with the Jewish people in order to rectify, to help us rectify. Says the Rebbe, this is not enough. Why? Because הרי עניין השם בא לתאר מהותו ועניינו העיקרי של הנקרא בשם זה. Right? Whenever something is called by a name,
that's his essence.
The name represents the essence. And the Rebbe here says to look in Likutei Sichot, Chelek Vav, Sof Amud 35. There he has a whole discussion, very important discussion, about machlokas between Reb Meir and the rest of Chachamim, especially Reb Yehuda, if Shma Garim, okay, whether the name causes. Is the name a cause for things in a person's life? And Reb Meir says it is. Sorry, the other person is Rabbi Yossi, not Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi says it's not. So Rabbi gives an interesting thing. Rabbi Meir, he sees the light inside. So he sees that the name, which is a vessel for the neshama, for the light inside, so of course it's part of the light. But Rabbi Yossi, who is a elem, who sees concealment, he doesn't see it that way. He just sees it as a vessel. He doesn't see through it. So for him, it's not related to the light. It's not related to what the soul needs. How does he see that, right, Rabbi Yossi? Because it's a famous thing in the Gemara. When the Gemara in Shavuos wants to explain what's the example of a person using God's name to curse God, it gives the example of Yakeh Yossi et Yossi. Right? What's Yakeh Yossi et Yossi? Yossi should strike Yossi. That's the example in the Shavuos, remember, in the beginning. What is that? It says Yossi in Gematria is 86. It's equal to Elokim. It's like a person, the Gemara didn't want to write. The person said God should strike God. So they wrote, okay, Yossi et Yossi. And everyone knows Yossi is equal to 86 to Elokim. So the Rebbe says whenever Rabbi Yossi appears in the Gemara, he also means in spiritually that it's talking about a state of concealment. So Reb Meir is from O, is from light. Reb Yossi is from concealment, from Elokim, the same way that the Teva, the name Elokim, is the Magen, right? It's the sheath in which the name Havaya goes. Uvi inyanenu, and in our example, Aval pi, in our context, Aval pi shemashiach mechulal mipsha'enu, עד שמשיח עצמו הוא מנוגע. מכל מקום לכאורה אין זה עניינו העיקרי של משיח, כי זהו עניין שלילי. So even though he's described as afflicted by us, because of us, and he himself is described as having the name of a Metzora, somebody who has tzaras, who has leprosy, מכל מקום, nonetheless, that's not his main purpose, because it's a negative thing. How could you say about the Mashiach that his main thing is negative? It's completely the opposite from any kind of logic. The Mashiach is a positive thing. Okay? When Mashiach comes, and this is the big problem with everybody's mindset, that people have lingering in their heads the idea that Mashiach Zeit, that the times of Mashiach are terrible, they're awful.
Why?
Why? Because Rav Yosef says in the Gemara, Yeite velo achimene. He should come, but I don't want to see him. Why do you want to see him?
They'll be hiding under the table because they didn't do enough.
Good. Because they'll be embarrassed. It's not because it's a terrible time. On the contrary, it's a wonderful time.
Right.
But if a person realizes, that's how Rav Busher used to also explain it. He said, when the Mashiach comes, people are going to go out in the middle of the night and toss bags full of money and jewelry into the in gold, not jewelry, but gold and silver and Bitcoin into the garbage bin, because they're going to be embarrassed that they collected so much money and they never gave tzedakah with it. And now it's too late, because nobody needs tzedakah anymore, because it's such a wonderful time.
But we all give tzedakah.
Suddenly you'll be embarrassed that you didn't give. What did you collect all this for? What do you need this 1,000,000 shekels for in the bank? What are you going to do with it? Well, you didn't trust me that I would come and everything. Nobody would need money anymore. Right? So people, says the Rebbe, no, the Mashiach hu geulatam shel Yisrael. He's the Redeemer. Binyan Bet HaMikdash v'Kibbutz Nitchei Yisrael. It's all going to be good. How can you say that Mashiach is related to wars, to calamities, to hunger, to famine? Well, what are you talking about? That's not Mashiach. You're talking about something else. I don't know what you're talking about. And your fears, the fears are of being embarrassed. It's, by the way, the same thing by people, the way that they are taught. The same issue, exactly. That they're taught that when you go up to Shamayim, wait until they give you what you deserve. And the person doesn't understand. Nobody has to hurt you. Nobody has to do anything to you. You're going to do it to yourself. Because you're just going to be embarrassed. Because you're going to stand naked in the sense of everybody's going to see everything you did. And you're just going to be embarrassed. And there's no greater punishment in the world. Nobody has to touch you. Nobody has to, you did it all to yourself. So they have all these, they're going to burn you like this and fry you that way and this. What are you talking about?
You learned from Yosef and the brothers. Yosef says,
when they died from embarrassment, their neshama left them.
Well, what did he say to them? But you told me that if Binyamin doesn't come back, right, my father's going to die. What happened about Yosef? I leave Yosef.
Good.
My father lives
still alive? See, he's still alive.
Right.
What about you?
So a bunch of baloney, right?
Good. Stop scaring us. Stop with the idiocy. Stop. Because why did they do this in previous generations? Because people were not able to understand. They couldn't understand. They couldn't even imagine. What does it mean even? Nobody could imagine 50, 60 years ago. Maybe they began to imagine that.
Give me a video.
What does it mean that they're going to show my whole life? They couldn't even imagine. What in the world does that mean? There's no such thing. And today it's
hidden cameras.
It's happening anyway. Right. You know, it came to me a guy who works in one of the intelligence agencies. He came to me for other things. And he says to me, look, I can't explain to you what I'm suffering from, if I can't explain to you what's going on in the world. So I said, what do you mean? He says, do you know anything about 2030? He says, I've heard things. No, do you know where the world is going? He says, yeah, I know where they want to take the world. So, and they're not hiding it. There's nothing to hide. If you just read a little, you'll understand where it's going.
What's going to happen in 2030?
It's not going to happen. It's happening right now. It's just in 2030 is when people will probably stop working. So the whole thing about how to control the world once there's no work. There's a lot of mishigas going on. Theoretical discussions about how to build society in a different way when there's no need for most people to work anymore. So there's all kinds of directions. In any case, one of the things that's happening is that everybody's becoming like China. All the democracies are going the path of China, which is terrible for democracies. So he says, we're building, wherever he is, he's building this and that and the other thing. It's this surveillance system that you don't know it. It knows everything about you. With them on here in Israel, it's supposedly a democracy, there's a right to privacy, but it knows everything about you. So that anybody wants to know everything they can. It was a big secret that they let out because of Corona, that the Shabbat can know where you are. They sort of know where you are. They're not perfect yet, but they're getting there. So I said to him, I don't see it as something negative. I see it as a positive thing. It will change the way the world functions. For the better, not for the worse. And I told him, look, the criminals, they'll always find a way to circumvent these systems. Because when you want to be a criminal, you want to do it because you decided that that's the path you want to follow, you'll find a way. That's how criminals work. But regular people, they do all kinds of things they're not supposed to do. The moment that every single action that you do is recorded, and you know that it's recorded, it's no longer a story that says in the book. There's a book that Jews have been carrying around, these strange people that daven in the middle of a highway. I don't know if you saw the video from on 87, going up from New York to Montreal. There was a big backup on the Canadian-American border. Okay. So you see a video of all the Hasidim davening on the side of this is like, I don't know, 1,000 cars. In 1,000 cars you find 10 Yidden. You find a lot more because it's Erev Chag. So the Goyim all go out and you see somebody did a video of the Goyim. So they're all standing there with Baruch Hashem, that's all they're doing. Kind of used to throw stones once. Now they don't know from their lives. So they walk around and then they're with their cameras and they're taking pictures of the Yidden davening on the side of the road. Look at this strange thing. So in the strange book that these Jews have said, what does it say? Everything's written down. So until now we thought it was just written in the book. Now you'll know that Mr. Biden has, at his will, whenever he wants, he has a fisheye. And he can see anything he wants about anybody. No, so now you have it in practice. Now you have it here. It's going to change the way that people act. There's no question. And people are against it. Why are they against it? Because they don't want anybody to know what they do wrong. But that's, what do you mean? Hashem always knew. So from Hashem you weren't embarrassed, and now from some idiot who doesn't care about you, doesn't know who you are, and didn't give you life, it's not going to take it away from you, and from him you're embarrassed. So, but that when you don't get it, you don't get it. So finally, in the end, you'll get it. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing that by 2030, every single act that we do everywhere, every single breath we take is going to be documented. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Who said it's a bad thing? It's not democratic, so what?
Well, communism fell, and democracy is the next one on the list.
Can.
Democracy is just as big in the great desire as communism was.
No, it only has one good thing. One good thing is freedom. Freedom is a good thing. Because you want people to have free will. You want people to decide to follow the right path because they want to. You don't want to force them. I just saw a drasha from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein in 1938. And the drasha was, I'm not mistaken, it was 1938. Tzadik Chet. The drasha was that why is democracy better than all the totalitarian systems? So he says the Goyim start out with a bang. They come and tell you we have this great new theory, this great new ideology. that if everybody just followed this ideology, out of will, of course, because they want to, because they understand its greatness, the world will be a perfect place.
Okay.
So they start out like that. After a few months, they realize that's a stupid ideology. Nobody wants to, the only ones who believe it are the guys who are peddling it. They really believe it. They really think it's good. Now they're in power, which is like what happened in the Soviet Union, right? They had this ideology. There were 20,000 of them, or 50,000 of them, or whatever the number was, the white kind of the red communists, whatever. And then they got into power, and nobody cares for their ideology. So what do? So they turn around, and instead of doing it in the beginning, they promised freedom. They promised everything would be because it's so great. You don't have to convince anybody. They'll see it by themselves because we're so convinced that it's true. So after a few months, they see that nobody's convinced. And nobody wants to follow it. So they begin coercion. So they become totalitarian, because that's the only way they can force their ideology down people's throats. He says it happens in every single non-Jewish culture ever. The only system, and he says that's why we have to say thank you to Hashem that we live in America, because America, church and state are separate, and church means ideology. So the ideology is not forced down your throat. So every person can live the way they think they need to live. It says that's the only redeeming quality of democracy. That at least you don't have to live like a dog because somebody wants to force something down your throat.
Where did you see this?
Oh, I'll send it to you. It's from Russia.
What?
There's Drash Moshe. There's a book called Drash Moshe. It has all his Russians, and I don't know, a lot of his Russians from the various years. Very strong things. I asked the question, everybody got angry at me. Since in Eretz Yisrael, they decided when they created the state that it's going to be Melech Kechol Ha'amim. It's going to be a
light unto the nation.
No, Melech Kechol Ha'amim. It's going to be a government like all governments.
Oh, okay.
Melech Kechol Ha'amim, that's what it means. Like a king like all nations. We're not going to do something special. We're just going to do whatever's... So if it's that way, so would Moshe also argue that here in Eretz Yisrael would be better that we would have a separation between church and state? That's the question. That's what the logic follows. Everybody got upset at me.
What?
Why? Oh, it's not the same. How could you say that? I don't know. I didn't say that you have to. I'm just asking, what's the logic? Does the logic follow?
Maybe it would be better if there was a separation.
Yeah, at least it gives you the presence of mind to think. You know, there's people who aren't allowed to think. You're not allowed to think. Is it Chas v'Shalom?
The worst thing that the Zionists ever did, out of all the things they did, was to make the 1 day a week off on Saturday.
Why is that?
Because by that, they basically killed Yiddishkeit.
Because
you have to work 6 days a week, at least it was in the beginning. So the only day that you were free was Shabbos. So when you go see the family, on Shabbos. When you do the shopping, on Shabbos. And so you were forced to break Shabbos, even though...
No, but in the beginning they had a thing that you weren't allowed to open stores on Shabbos. So you couldn't do shopping on
Went to the
Shabbos.
Arab towns to go shopping.
I don't know if that was it.
In those days you could go into Jenin, there was no problem. You could go into
Jenin couldn't go into at all. It was in Jordan.
Whatever it was, you know.
You mean like
Julia.
They did a lot of terrible things. I don't know if that's... In any case, it says the Rebbe, so the Mashiach's main purpose is to bring goodness to the world. It's not to be afflicted. It's not about all this. This is like something that's very minor. So why did Rabbanan, why did Chazal say in Sanhedrin and Daf Tzadik Chet and Mutbet, Chivra Davei Rebbe Shmo, that he's the leper from the house of Rebbe, that's his name. That leper from the house of Rebbe. Why? Even though it's needed, because it's rectifying the very end. But still, that's the main thing. Therefore, you have to say that leprosy is not just about rectification. It itself, the nega itself, the affliction itself, the blemish itself, is a symbol for redemption. How can that be? You see, first of all, he brings another example of this. It wasn't just said about Mashiach, meaning that he is a leper was not said only about Mashiach. It was said about something else as well. When we take careful care to read the Medrash, על הפסוק, on the verse, והצרוע אשר בו הנגע בגדיו יהיו פרומים, that the leper who has the blemish, his clothes will be undone, פרומים. והצרוע, says this Medrash, it's in Eicha Rabati, in Eicha Rabati, it says that Tzarua is the Beit HaMikdash. The Tzarua, the leper, is the temple. So you see that not just the Mashiach is called the leper, the whole temple is called the leper. How can you say something like that? You're saying the whole temple is a leper? Asher bo nega. So what's his blemish? Zu avodat kochavim. That's the idolatry that entered into the temple. What does it mean that his clothing will be undone? That's referring to the clothing of the priests, of the Kohanim. V'lichora, says the Rebbe, seemingly, Lashon HaMidrash v'atzarua ze bet HaMikdash tzrichiyun k'tzat. Why does it say the leper is the base of Mikdash? You have to understand this. It should have said, Ze Beit HaMikdash nechrav v'chayotze b'zeh. When it says that it's a leper, it doesn't mean that the temple all the time was a leper. It means that the temple, when it was destroyed, was, right, that's the negative part, when it was destroyed. Umau v'atzarua ze Beit HaMikdash. The mashmo shezeu tochen inyan HaMikdash atzmo. It's like saying that idolatry is an integral part of the temple. There's no way that the sages are saying this. So what do they mean when they say that? It actually says it's the same thing with the Mashiach. When they say his name is the Metzora, the leper from the house of Rebbe, they mean in the same way that they call the base of Mikdash, and it's because of the idolatry, the leper. But how can you say that the base of Mikdash stood there for 410 years and then 420 years? And most of the time, it was a house of worship of God. So because of the times that it was afflicted with idolatry, because of that, you say the whole thing is called a leper? Why would you do this? Because that's its essence. And again, that's what the Rebbe started with.
Where do people use the base of Mikdash for Avodah Zarah?
All the time, there was all kinds of Avodah Zarah brought in. Menashe brought Avodah Zarah in the first temple. And then in the second temple, when it was destroyed, and that's apparently mostly what he means, it was turned into Jupiter's temple, Aelia Capitolina. They turned it into they erased it, and then they built it. There was a temple for Janus there. Janus is, I think, Jupiter or something.
Dome of the Rock.
Yeah, there wasn't a Dome of the Rock yet. It was just a. V'yesh lomar, we'll finish here today. It's not very long, there's only one more page afterwards. So this medrash, just like what we read from Sanhedrin about the Mashiach, it means that if you call the base of Mikdash by the name leper, and you call the Mashiach by the name leper, there's something positive in this name. It can't be otherwise.
Everything's positive when you get into the bottom.
Can, but you understand, it's not positive by a drush. It's not like some kind of, I'll switch it over and then it'll become positive. No, he says it's something positive in and of itself. This is very different than what we usually do. When we say that the Nachash is like Mashiach, we're saying they're opposites. Here he's not saying that leprosy is the opposite of the positive. It is the positive. The question is why. שמצד זה נקרא מקדש בשם והצרוע, עוד לפני שניתן בו הנגע זו עבודת כוכבים, שאז נעשה צרוע לגירותה, כמו שמשיח נקרא בשם חברה מצורע דבי רבי. So now we have to understand, tomorrow we'll understand, why is it that these two things, the Mashiach and the Mikdash, are called both lepers. And that is even before they're afflicted, even before the base of Mikdash became a place of Avodah Zarah, of idolatry, and before the Mashiach is even afflicted, he's called a leper. It's something essential to them. So now we have to understand leprosy a different way. That's what we're going to learn tomorrow. Gimel and Dalet.
Fine. יישר כוח גדול.